Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat to amazing humans about their journeys. For these episodes, we're talking about neurodiversity. I'm really happy today to introduce and welcome back Will Blundell to the conversation. Welcome, Will.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. Will and I first sat down and recorded back in June 2021, where he told us his journey with mental health and also with his neurodiversity, which is he's going to talk about autism. But Will, tell us another story. Tell us about your life with autism and your journey.
Sure, yeah. So, where do I start? So, um, as ever, I'm going to sort of summarize these sort of things before I get going. So,
Yeah.
I was given an adult diagnosis of autism in 2018. So it's about 5 years ago now, and it's sort of only just on the spectrum. So, what I really want to focus with today is the gray zone because people know that it's a spectrum by now. But so then they have ideas about what it means to be autistic, and those are usually at one end of the spectrum. It's the gray area in the middle where there's a lot of people, I would imagine, that still trying to figure things out, and sometimes it takes a life event or two to kind of make you go through that journey. So that's the sort of thing I want to talk about. Um, a little bit about my background, so you can sort of see where I'm coming from, and um, I guess why it was an adult diagnosis and wasn't picked up earlier, kind of thing. I had a pretty lucky upbringing, private schooling, went through exams, GCSEs, all those A levels, bits and pieces, without any particular trouble. Plenty of friends. I was always one of the quiet ones. That was about pretty much the only defining thing that was on every single report card for about 5 years. Um, and I had two older brothers as well, so I had quite a lot sort of handed to me, given to me. I got the grades to study dentistry at London, University in London, um, and no particular difficulties to start with, but it was the 5 years became harder and harder. I had no idea why at the time. Um, it was I was obviously to be a dentist, you have to work with patients. Obviously, you have to talk to people every
Yeah.
day, all day, every day, and it was it was very hard to begin with. I was very lonely in first year, but it did get better, I suppose, to begin with. It was um, it's difficult because I'm trying to think back with the mind that I have now, where
Yeah.
it wasn't the mind that I had back then.
Wow.
So it came across at the time of me being forced out of my shell, becoming more confident. I picked up a lot of the communication skills that I show these days, and I learned to sort of mask. Again, that's sort of today's brain thinking about that. Mask all the problems and interactions and bits and pieces that I had back then.
Yeah.
I did graduate. Again, exams weren't too much of a problem. And went into general practice, and that is when things started to go downhill. I um, when it was 5 patients a day, when I was at university, that wasn't so bad. But when it hit 20, 30, 40 patients a day, um, I just could not take the mental load, the emotional load of.
Mm.
I like to describe it as like my emotions bouncing from one
Yeah.
patient to the next, because when it comes to like um, communication, you have to kind of meet the same energy as the other person, or find a compromise, and that takes a lot of work. That
Yeah.
takes work for everyone, but for me, and what I later know as a kind of an autistic sort of symptom, I suppose is maybe the right word, is it was just a lot harder on me. It was a lot more difficult to do. So it would wear me down day after day, and I started to, now looking back, see the symptoms of arriving exactly on time, not early, just
Wow.
exactly on time, struggling to get out of bed. Every minute in bed was precious, kind of thing. Depression was creeping in. And there was just a sort of living for the weekend, surviving. That's the better word, surviving until the weekend.
Right.
That feeling of relief when a patient misses an appointment, so I get 10 minutes off, sort of thing.
Oh,
It's
wow.
these should have kind of been warning signs at the start. And I probably wouldn't have lasted 3 years if I'd spotted some of these sort of warning signs a bit earlier in practice. But yeah, so um, it continued to get worse. I had no idea what was going on. Other sort of issues crept in at the same time, and my mental health just continued to deteriorate until until I resigned. I had no plan for the future. I just knew that I had to get out, so I did. And things started to just collapse without the structure of work and everything. I had a sort of full-on mental meltdown that triggered 5 years of sort of mental health problems and self-discovery, which are fortunately long behind me now. But it was in that period of self-discovery where I got the diagnosis of autism, and I think it is the turning point. I would say, because it started to refocus some of the thoughts that I was having.
Can I just ask you a very quick question there? So what led you to thinking autism might be present? Was it a conversation you had with somebody, or how did that come about?
No, that's a good question. So it certainly wasn't the first thing that was considered in those first few months after resigning.
Say you're retired, that's fine.
Well, technically I am now. I could have called it just leaving at the time, but it was the usual things. The things like depression and anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, a bit of eating disorder in there crept in as well. And a couple of other things. Autism wasn't really considered. I think that's a lack of understanding, perhaps on the family's part, maybe. I mean, a lot of my family have what I would now describe as autistic traits, but no one else has been diagnosed with it. So, maybe there's a bit of that, but it's not a diagnosis. Was the sort of stance back then. But we never figured stuff out for those sort of year or two. I went through a long list of differential diagnoses with various psychologists and things. A couple of people wrote a case study on me because they couldn't figure me out.
Wow.
Because it was just there was about sort of five, should we call it five various problems that all just sort of meshed together, and no one could kind of really sort of figure out. The medications weren't helping enough. And talking therapies weren't helping enough. They all did a little bit, but never really sort of figured it out. But it was the autism that sort of once I sat through that diagnosis and let it settle in a bit, I could start to pull out some of the symptoms of, okay, so that isn't something of ill health. That is something that is just me, as it were. So it was this kind of sifting out of the symptoms where you could take something and go, okay, so I'm feeling down all the time. Well, that's depression. We can leave that one with depression. Or I really cannot tolerate, is that the word? I really cannot stand hanging out with people for long periods of time. I just seem to get far too tired far too quickly. Doesn't matter how my mental state is, it's just so draining more than anyone else. And that used to be stuck in the depression box, but now it's stuck in the autism box. And basically I had to do that for every sort of symptom that I'd listed for years. But that started to work, because then I could treat the symptoms, mitigate the problems of the ones that I could, and try to learn to accept the ones that I couldn't. And that took a couple of years, I think, to sort of fully settle in, although it's a journey that never ends, of course. I think most importantly, it's expectations, matching and managing expectations, where 20 years ago it was the expectations of people in authority, parents, professors, all the rest of that. And then it was my own expectations, which are usually the most damaging from my perspective. But now I can sort of refine, set more realistic expectations for myself, so I can say, no, I don't need to do that, or yes, I can do that differently, or something like that. Now they've got the knowledge sort of forearmed. So yeah, so just to highlight, it's that gray zone where I am on the spectrum, but only just. And because I went through that 5 years of dental school, it's masked. I can pretend that I'm neurotypical, I guess, but I now know to deal with these sort of things. Like this, for example, this interview is pretty draining for me. I can do it. I can communicate effectively, but I've got nothing else social planned for the rest of the day, just in case that
Okay.
it's too much for me, kind of thing.
Mm.
So it's just sort of structure my life in ways that are
Mm.
more me, my natural self, I suppose.
Yeah, Will, I find it fascinating, and thank you for sharing all
Mm.
of that, and helping people to see the perspective that you live with, in terms of the autism. Is it what I find interesting, of course, is that you're doing a great job and you're looking after yourself, and of course you went through that journey to become a dentist and then retired from that role.
Yeah.
So I love that thought. But I retired from all my previous jobs as well. But But what about sort of right now in terms of sort
Mm.
of people around you as well? So one of the things obviously we were trying to bring out for Neurodiversity sort of Celebration Week is awareness for people who are I guess
Yeah.
neurotypical, right? How do people
Yeah.
around you work with you? How do they, or do they know much about sort of what's going on for you?
So I'm quite happy to talk about these things. That's why I'm here. So everybody
Yeah.
around me does tend to know. Um, I'm lucky to say that I think everyone is pretty understanding of it.
Okay.
The kind of compromises, I suppose, the kind of like sessions I ask of them are pretty small. Most of the time, it doesn't have much of an effect. But there's
Yeah.
the odd work task that I have to kind of, I wouldn't say shy away from. So sometimes just say no to the cold calling. I'm kind of doing a bit of like 5 different roles at work at the moment. So if I
Right.
have to do something like cold calling, um, 30, 40 calls or something, that triggers that same sort of
Yeah.
I'm going to be in bed tomorrow kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so sort of slide myself away from those sort of tasks or ask for something different. Family and friends are perfectly fine with it. They like the objectivity that I can bring to chats. People come to me for advice and bits and pieces because um,
Okay.
they 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 find my way of breaking down problems a little different to everyone else's.
Mhm.
So people see me as a kind of problem solver, or at least
Okay.
someone opinionated. So
I
um,
guess that helps to solve problems at times, right?
certainly
As long as
can.
the opinion's formed from facts, everything else,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So a bit of that. So I've
Yeah.
picked up a mental health first aider sort of
Mm.
certificate to kind of put the things that I've learned into
Yeah.
nice neat boxes, and I can help people more.
Yeah, that's great. And you obviously understand the different perspectives, and then you understand from your own personal experience. So you've got
Mm,
that to add into that as well. And how are you finding those conversations? And thinking about sort of how even just us doing this is quite tiring and draining. Having a
yeah.
conversation when somebody's telling you they're really struggling, how's that feeling for you?
Yeah. It's if, I enjoy fixing other people's problems.
Right,
it's
okay.
it's my
Yeah.
own conversations, it's my own emotions that really drain me.
Okay.
So 2 hours with a friend on some relationship issue, for example, isn't anywhere near as draining, to be honest, because I remain that sort of
Mm.
objective um, distance almost. Like I can provide the emotional support, but that's not what people go to me for. So by the time friends come to me for chats, it's usually the what do I do next, Will, kind of
Okay.
chats.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as I say, helping other people is fantastically rewarding,
Yeah.
at least for these sort of conversations. So
Yeah. Well, that's good, and that's why we do what we do, right? With these
yeah,
conversations, and
absolutely.
why we're there to help and support people. What's your biggest challenge in terms of sort of day-to-day routines? Anything that sort of stands
Hmm.
out for you that you struggle with the most? I know obviously some of the conversations like these will tire you, but anything else that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's I suppose there's a bit of frustration. A lot of I do have a lot of time at the moment, and I've
Mhm.
got to sort of self motivate,
Right.
and that can be difficult. For example, if I want to continue my writing and become an author, I need to start sticking in several hours a week
Right. Yeah.
in order to sort of make that happen. And it's
Yeah.
difficult to find the motivation when I'm say left a bit drained from something the previous day or something. I don't want to just binge watch another Netflix series.
Well, sometimes that's not a bad thing, right?
So sometimes it's a good
People
thing, but
enjoy that. I guess it depends what you're watching, right?
everything in moderation and all that.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. But interestingly, you spoke about something there about your writing.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've enjoyed forever? Is that something that's
It,
just
it
sort of come
is.
to you recently?
It is. Some of my first few memories of writing writing stories when I was single digits. So
Right.
um yeah, and I think I'm gonna turn that from a hobby into more of a second income stream, hopefully at some point. Um I learn how to interact with people. It was never sort of innate. As I say, that's the
Yeah.
dental bit again.
Yeah.
So um I like to watch people. I like to understand people, and that hopefully translates into how to write a good character.
Right.
And interesting perspectives on life usually results hopefully in good stories. So put the two together and hopefully we've got a novel.
There you
I
go.
guess we'll see.
Amazing. Well, you did tell me before we recorded this, you've already sort of, invested a lot of time in writing some of this stuff as well, right?
It's yeah, somewhere along the journey. Yes, certainly
Yeah.
not too far.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. I love that. And would you say that's sort of a gift of, who you are? You have that ability because you have that objectivity and
Yeah,
have that different way of seeing things.
there's absolutely. So we've covered some of the limitations I find. There's
Mm.
just in this, can I say something, like in this part of the spectrum,
Yep.
it's where you get these sort of things where you're kind of skewed. You've got some disadvantages and some advantages.
Yeah.
So I've got a natural gift for spotting patterns and trends, which is good from anything from like predicting a budget to to working out how someone's going to react in certain situations.
Right.
Sort of that sort of insight. I've got that sort of bit of a. I've got. I have lists for everything, so let me refer to
That's
my list.
brilliant. I love it. Yeah. So,
Well, what's it? Some of the times these lists get a bit too long. Yeah, so sort of I learn very quickly. So if that's why I'm doing a bit of 5 different jobs at work, because people are like, my job is quite quiet as I transition to something slightly different, and everybody else's job is kind of hectic. So they give me brand new tasks and I pick them up quickly and efficiently.
right.
So I'm that sort of guy.
Yeah, that's good, and that's on the positive sides, right? So that's
Absolutely.
good. So, so what other positive? Any other positives in there that you've explored?
I have to say something along the lines of imagination. I don't know how you quantify how good you are at imagining things, but I seem to be able to wrap my head around lots of sort of different things that other people can't. So yeah, helps me be creative.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that those and they're skills that businesses and organizations are looking for as well now, aren't they?
That's
So
right.
you're seeing a lot more about it, and that's what we're seeing as well. So hence the reason it's a celebration week of neurodiversity in many ways, because it's looking at all the positive things. Of course, we need to understand the other challenges you would go through in those experiences of life, and we're in a world that's built for neurotypical people, and it's not always as easy to sort of navigate through that if you
No, indeed.
So, this is great. I so love chatting to you again and sort of catching up. What else have you got on your list? Is there anything else on your list you want to share?
There's always more things on the list.
Oh yeah.
So the principal sign, I suppose, would be the technical symptom of what I struggle with on a day-to-day basis, called alexithymia. But basically, it's the disconnect between what I feel, use the right words, what I experience as an emotion and what I feel, how I perceive those emotions. So I see feelings as the perception of an emotion. Now, for most people, that's fairly innate. Let's say you're hungry, therefore you feel hungry. And so you have a lack of food, you feel hungry, so you go eat. Now that process is innate in most people. For me, it doesn't seem to work quite as well. So I can mismatch. I can sort of cross my wires on something. So I used to, probably still do, confuse anxiety and hunger, for example. So I'd experience one, but feel the other sometimes. And that's what sort of caused the eating disorder. That was never particularly serious, but it was there, and I had to figure out that connection existed first, and then I did, and then that was the end of the eating disorder. So it wasn't so bad. But there's other things like the quietness that I mentioned on every report card. That was put down as a sort of lack of confidence. It wasn't at all. It was tiredness.
Okay.
So.
And what was triggering the tiredness? Was it the change? Was it something that was going on around that moment?
No, so just the school environment, the university environment, it was that sort of constantly being around other people, the noise. I'm the quiet one because I wasn't confident, was just how it was described by everybody around me and by myself at the time. When in fact I was perfectly confident. I was just tired.
Just tired from all of that. Sensory overload. And sort of from a sensory perspective, just touching on that briefly, anything else, obviously the noise, the sound, the environment, but anything else that you've noticed in sort of key senses for you?
So there were certainly patches of that in that self-discovery 5 years,
Mm.
where sounds would just be complete overloads.
Yeah.
Now, though, no, because a symptom of depression is also that sort of auditory
Yeah.
overload kind of thing. And that was one of the symptoms that I took a while to sort of put in the right box. I thought, okay, well, maybe that is an autistic kind of thing, because I know that autistic people can struggle with that. But no, it actually, for me, it seemed to go in the depression box.
Okay.
So not so much that one. No, it's sensory, I think, apart from my own experience of my emotions, I don't think there's much sensory.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, different people, different experiences, of course. And
Yeah.
what I'm finding fascinating about recording these episodes is hearing everybody's differences.
Yeah.
You know, the uniqueness of everybody, which is just, you know, it's a wonderful, beautiful thing, but it's also a challenge, because it's almost, we've got to learn everything about everything, and
Indeed,
just to be able to. But you know what? The best way we can do it is have conversations like this. So I think that's the simplest way, isn't it? We are right at the end of this, Will. This time just disappears, sort of floats away. But just final thoughts from you. Any messages you want to send to people? Anything you want to share? Just a final thought.
For me, it was about learning as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because we've got fantastic doctors, medications, lots of stuff out there. It was, I think, me that had to put it all together. So learning about yourself is a very worthwhile pastime.
Brilliant. I love that. Well, we'll leave that as the final thought, shall we? Learning about yourself is a very worthwhile pastime. I think that's really useful, and I do believe that that's part of the journey that most people don't realize they should be on, but until
they're forced to go on it sometimes. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the truth, right? Will, thank you so much for joining me again. I really do appreciate it. It's been amazing to hear
My pleasure.
Give me more insights into your world and the things that you're doing. I just want to wish you all the very best of luck with everything in the future. Look after yourself. You know, happy retirement from dentistry, and good luck with the future as the novelist and writing books and everything else.
Yeah,
amazing
absolutely.
stuff.
Thank you.
All the best to you, mate. Look after yourself. Yeah.
Thanks.
Cheers.